The Disney princesses are some of the most iconic characters on Earth. They've spanned decades with a variety of films and TV series. They've received sequels, spin-offs, short films, alongside an endless flow of dolls and dresses. But life isn't perfect, even for a princess. Each of the Disney princesses has experienced their own hardships, whether it be family drama, societal pressure, or the loss of a loved one. Today, we're going to be breaking down the worst thing to happen to each princess. I'm Kieran with Wicked Binge, and this is the worst things to happen to Disney princesses. As of the making of this video, there are 13 official Disney princesses. We're also adding Anna and Elsa to this list, even though they aren't officially Disney princesses. Starting us off is Snow White, the very first Disney princess. The worst thing to happen to Snow White is the threat of the evil queen. Snow White was born a princess, her parents being the king and queen, but family life was short-lived. Snow White's mother died in childbirth. After years of grieving, the king remarried a new maiden, but she was nothing like Snow White's mother. Snow White's mother, the queen, was kind and nurturing. Snow White's stepmother was bitter and jealous. Then the king died, when Snow White was still a child, and his new wife was suspected to have played a role in his demise. Snow White grew up in the care of her stepmother, who had now taken the title of Queen. She was called the Evil Queen because of her selfish and menacing ways. The Evil Queen mistreated Snow White for years. She demanded Snow White wear rags and stay indoors. The Evil Queen stifled Snow White wherever possible. She tried repressing Snow White because Snow White was heir to the throne. The Evil Queen knew that if anything were to happen to her, Snow White would replace her as queen. Not only that, but the Evil Queen was envious of Snow White's beauty. Snow White was the fairest in the land, the most beautiful girl in the entire kingdom. The Evil Queen desired to be the most beautiful herself, so she kept Snow White in isolation, making her wear rags to hide her beauty. But it didn't work. The people still saw Snow White as beautiful, so the Evil Queen ordered the woodsman to kill her. The woodsman agreed, but when face to face with Snow White, he backed down. He did let her free, but Snow White wasn't free from the queen yet. The Evil Queen turned herself into a witch and brewed a poison apple to kill Snow White once and for all. Snow White ate the apple, entranced by this seemingly sweet old lady. The poison immediately took effect, killing Snow White on the spot. Snow White spent her life entrapped by her evil stepmother, who ultimately tried to kill her twice. That's definitely the worst thing to happen to Snow White. Cinderella is up next. Cinderella's main concern is abusive parenting. After the death of her father, Cinderella was raised by her wicked stepmother and two evil stepsisters. Her stepmother was cold and cruel and forced Cinderella to be the family's maid. Cinderella's stepsisters were argumentative and materialistic, valuing their appearances more than any real kindness. Cinderella spent years slaving away for her family. She was even given the demeaning nickname Cinderella by them. Her birth name was Ella, but her evil stepsisters called her Cinderella because she once got cinders in her hair while cleaning the fireplace. Despite how harshly she was treated, Cinderella endured it all. She worked hard for her family, acting as the maid regardless of how poorly she was treated. She befriended animal companions like the mice that lived in the walls and the birds that sang in the morning, and year after year she kept doing her duties, hoping that there would be a chance to free herself from her wicked stepmother. Then it finally came. She heard word of a ball that every girl in the kingdom was invited to. The prince was due to marry, and that ball was meant to allow the prince to choose a bride. Girls from across the kingdom were ecstatic for a chance to marry the prince, evil stepsisters included. Cinderella, humble as always, helped her stepsisters make their dresses for the ball. She sewed a fancy gown for both stepsisters and her stepmother. The stepsisters wanted to look as beautiful as possible for the prince, so Cinderella went all out on their gowns. She even made herself a beautiful dress. Cinderella hoped the ball would be one night of freedom. Her family members were obsessed with charming the prince, so Cinderella would be free to spend the night free from their abuse. But it didn't last. The evil stepmother and stepsisters destroyed Cinderella's dress, forbidding her from going to the ball. Thankfully, the fairy godmother arrived to give Cinderella the freedom and happily ever after she deserved. Cinderella struggled with abusive parenting for years. She was forced to be her family's maid and denied the opportunity to be her own person. That's the worst thing to happen to Cinderella. Next up is Sleeping Beauty, Aurora. Sleeping Beauty was born Princess Aurora, daughter of the king and queen. To celebrate their daughter's birth, the king and queen held a ceremony. everyone in the kingdom was invited, except for the evil sorceress Maleficent. During the ceremony, 3 fairy godparents bestowed Aurora with magical gifts, but Maleficent gatecrashed the party and, as punishment for being snubbed, cursed Aurora. The curse established that before Aurora's 16th birthday, she'd prick her finger on a spindle and die. The fairy godparents were able to alter the curse and dampen its effects. Now, instead of dying, Aurora would fall asleep until she was kissed by a prince. To protect their daughter, the king and queen had every spindle in the kingdom destroyed. As an added layer of protection, the fairies raised Aurora as their own. All seemed well. Aurora even fell in love with Prince Philip, heir to a kingdom that was merging with her own. Then Maleficent tricked Aurora into pricking her finger on a spindle anyway, so the curse came to fruition. To make matters worse, Maleficent kidnapped Prince Philip so he couldn't reverse the curse. This is the worst thing Aurora has had to go through. In the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty is based off of, Sleeping Beauty slept for 100 years before the curse was broken. During this time, the kingdom fell into chaos and everyone she knew had passed away. The Disney version is far less severe, with Prince Philip battling Maleficent to break the curse. Aurora's slumber is the worst thing she's had to go through, though. Now for Ariel. Ariel's major problem is social pressure and longing for a different lifestyle. As King Triton's daughter, Ariel was born a princess. She had only ever known the royal lifestyle, which is wealthy and sheltered. Ariel wanted more from her life. She wanted to explore, see the world, and learn about its wonders. This manifested as a fascination with the human world. Ariel was transfixed by anything human. She spent her days searching shipwrecks for treasures. She built a treasure trove to store her enormous collection of them. She spent her spare time learning everything she could about human artifacts, but pressures from her life kept hounding her. Ariel's father held her to her royal duties. He pressured her to stay away from the surface world. As Ariel resisted, he became increasingly forceful. He told his advisor, Sebastian, to follow Ariel and discourage her from collecting treasures. Sebastian did as he was instructed. He tailed Ariel, singing "Under the Sea" to convince her to stay in her own world. But Ariel's dream to branch out was uncontained. She saved Prince Eric from a shipwreck. In doing so, Ariel had her first contact with a human. Her curiosity stronger than ever, Ariel was considering a trip to the surface world. King Triton stepped in, ruling with an iron fist. He used his magic to destroy Ariel's treasure trove, trying to force her compliance. This was Ariel's darkest moment. Her father destroyed her most prized possessions. He actively interferes with her passion, trying to keep her safe. But all he's really doing is stifling his daughter, preventing her from seeing the world. Ariel had spent years growing her collection, but it was destroyed in seconds. Her fascination had reached its peak, only to come crashing down again. Ariel decided this was the last straw, and she was going to the surface world. She needed to chase her dream and to see what the world had to offer, especially if her existing life treated her so poorly. This was a huge turning point for Ariel, where she learned that her ocean life wouldn't accommodate her needs. Ariel bargained her voice in exchange for a trip to the surface world. She lived among humans. She wore their clothes, ate their food, and explored their settlements. She was an outsider, a literal fish out of water, but on the surface, her quirks were embraced rather than suppressed. The worst thing to happen to Ariel was social pressure interfering with her dream. The moment King Triton destroys Ariel's treasures displays this perfectly. Up next is Belle. Belle's major struggle is being trapped. In the very opening of Beauty and the Beast, Belle is unhappy. She's grown tired of ordinary life among the townspeople. She wants to learn more about herself and the world. Belle is an avid reader and uses books as an outlet to learn more about what's out there. But reading isn't quite enough for Belle, who wants more than this provincial life. To make matters worse, Belle and her father are isolated from the townspeople. They view Belle's father, Maurice, as a loony, Gaston calling him a crazy old fool. Belle herself is deemed an outsider. She's called rather odd, and her passion for literature is clearly misunderstood. The town's best hunter, Gaston, decides to marry Belle because she's the most beautiful girl in town. He's very superficial and has no interest in Belle as an actual person, only really a trophy. Belle fights off Gaston's marital advances, but he becomes increasingly determined. Belle feels trapped in the village, trapped in her relationships. Then Belle surrenders her freedom to the Beast, becoming more literally trapped. Being imprisoned in the castle brings out Belle's stubborn side. She refuses to eat with Beast and sneaks out to eat after hours. She also explores the West Wing, the one part of the castle that was deemed off limits. When Beast screams at her, she runs away, freeing herself from her literal imprisonment. But it isn't as it seems. She gets attacked by wolves, and it's the Beast who comes to her rescue. Underneath his anger is a lonely young prince who doesn't know how to love. Over time, Belle and Beast grow fond of each other. They dance together, eat together, and play together. Beast even shows interest in Belle's reading, something Gaston has never done. Only through human connection does Belle free herself of her confines. She's both physically and socially trapped, but by finding love and standing by her values, Belle finds freedom. Now for Princess Jasmine. Like many of the other princesses, Jasmine's main struggle is societal pressure. She's restricted by her father and the laws of her kingdom, pushed into being a person she doesn't want to be. The laws of Agrabah state that royalty must marry royalty. This preserves the royal bloodline and keeps leadership within the upper class. Jasmine, though, refuses to marry for politics, instead desiring to marry for love. What a concept. Despite Jasmine's wishes, she is pressured to marry with an onslaught of suitors pursuing her. Jasmine is treated like a commodity rather than a person. She's viewed by her suitors only as Agrabah's princess, not as an individual with hopes and dreams. Many royals are interested in Jasmine's beauty and the power of Agrabah, including Jafar, but nobody takes an interest in Jasmine's own personality and desires. Even her father, the Sultan, dismisses her beliefs. During the scene by the water fountain, Jasmine expresses her need for true love rather than political love. Her father comforts her, but doesn't falter to remind her that marriage is her duty as a princess. Jasmine is also restricted from leaving the palace. As a princess, she's deemed too valuable and kept within the palace walls where she can be protected more easily. Jasmine longs to see the world and grows resentful of her title. She sneaks out to see Agrabah under the guise of being a commoner. There she meets Aladdin, an orphaned commoner who helps her escape trouble. He shows her his hideout, and for the first time in years, Jasmine experiences real connection. Aladdin is interested in Jasmine's true self, not because she's beautiful nor because she's the princess, but because Aladdin understands that there's more to people than what's on the surface. A whole new world displays Aladdin and Jasmine's relationship, with their struggles being fully realized. Jasmine wants to be seen as her true self and to see the world. Aladdin takes her on a magic carpet ride and helps her achieve both. Aladdin also wants to be seen as his true self. He wants people to value him rather than view him as a street rat. Jasmine has endured similar treatment, so she's able to help him open up. Jasmine's biggest struggle is with people's perception of her. Through helping Aladdin with a similar struggle, she's able to overcome social pressure and be the best version of herself. Up next is Pocahontas. The main conflict of Pocahontas is between the English settlers and the native Powhatan tribal nation. Conflict between the two ethnic groups creates turmoil within Pocahontas herself. Pocahontas falls in love with John Smith, an explorer who arrived with the British colony in search of gold. Both Pocahontas and Smith are initially hostile towards each other, but grow to see beauty within the other's heart. Pocahontas realizes that Smith spared her life. She introduces him to many natural wonders, and Smith learns to value nature. Smith calls Pocahontas uncivilized at first, but over time he learns that Pocahontas understands nature more than the British ever could. As tension between the two nations grows, Pocahontas falls under pressure from both sides. The film starts with Pocahontas uncertain about her fate. She had a mysterious dream about a spinning arrow and resists an arranged marriage to an emerging tribal leader, Kokum. Her love for Smith forces her to lie to her people, including her father. As hostilities grow between the two groups, Pocahontas faces difficult decisions. Kokum is accidentally killed by a settler, and John Smith is captured by the natives. This is the worst thing to happen to Pocahontas. The division between her internal and external self is fully tested in the climax. After an ongoing internal battle between Pocahontas' loyalties and sense of self, she's forced to make a decision. The scene where Pocahontas goes to visit John Smith before his execution exemplifies this. Pocahontas sees her loved one tied up and in despair. He's on death row, and it's Pocahontas' own father and people who put him there. This is the turning point of Pocahontas' character arc, where she figures out the path she wants to take, where she stops lying to herself and her people to embrace her loyalties and be her true self. The worst thing to happen to Pocahontas is internal conflict and being on the outside of two societies. But learning to embrace her true self and reconcile the two social groups brings Pocahontas' arc to a close, finally at peace with herself. Next up is Mulan. Mulan's biggest challenge is, well, gender roles within a conservative society. Mulan grew up in ancient China, where gender roles were rigid and tradition was important. As a young woman, Mulan was expected to marry. Duties for women were conventional housework and childbearing, while men were builders and protectors. These gender roles were in place for centuries, and people were socially expected to conform to them. But Mulan didn't fit into the established role for women. She was free-spirited and felt a kinship with nature. She was smart and spoke her mind, which women weren't encouraged to do. Mulan's family worried that she wouldn't be able to marry, but they prepared her for marriage, hoping that it would work out. Mulan tried her hardest to be a perfect bride, dressing up, practicing etiquette, and being polite, but her efforts fell flat. Mulan embarrassed herself in front of the matchmaker, who deemed Mulan unable to marry. She was considered a failure, unable to perform her expected duties. During this time, the Huns were invading China and a war was brewing. The emperor decreed that every family needed to provide a man for military service. Mulan was an only child, and her father was old and wounded from a previous war. She knew that he'd not survive a confrontation with the Huns. Unable to marry and unable to let her father die, Mulan took his place in secret. Under the cloak of darkness, she cut her hair, donned her father's armor, and set off to training.
I'm just nervous. I've never done this before.
She trained alongside the men and prepared for war. She even saved her unit with some quick thinking in the mountains. But in doing so, she was revealed to be a woman. Mulan's unit turned on her. They considered executing her for treason, but she did just save their lives, so they banished her, leaving her alone in the snow. This is the lowest point for Mulan. After training tirelessly and saving her unit, she was abandoned by the very people she'd worked to protect. The soldiers she'd bonded with throughout the training turned their backs on her. She tried defying gender roles to avoid being someone she wasn't, but gender roles caught up with her. She was left in the snow, expelled, and belittled. The worst thing to happen to Mulan was the strict gender expectations being placed on her. They beat her down, and even when she triumphed, she was left behind. Now for Tiana. Tiana's main conflict is a class struggle. She's a young black woman in 1920s New Orleans. During this time, there's a substantial class divide based on race. Her friend Charlotte is born rich and lives a life of glamour. She works at a diner and lives in a poor but supportive black community. Despite being poor, Tiana loves her community. Her father instilled her with a passion for cooking because food brings people together. After his passing, Tiana aspires to open up her own restaurant. Her aims are ultimately to unite people with her cooking and to improve her social class. This is distinctive from other Disney princesses. Many Disney princesses are born royal. Snow White, Ariel, Moana, so on. The ones that aren't are still usually well respected. For instance, Mulan's family is well respected because of her father's military service. Tiana is the only Disney princess whose family is of a lower social class, making her journey especially unique. She follows a similar arc to the other princesses, being assigned a role by society that doesn't suit her and forming herself a new role. But Tiana's humble beginnings really help sell her emotional journey. Tiana faces continual challenges when working for her restaurant.
Are you talking about that dang restaurant again?
She saves for years to afford the initial payment. When she makes the loan, she fantasizes about what her restaurant will look like. But the obstacles keep popping up. Tiana has to work hard for a dream that's constantly ripped from her clutches. The bank goes back on her loan, offering her restaurant to a wealthier client. People also don't believe that Tiana is able to improve her social standing at all. Her colleagues at the diner, members of her community, and even her closest friend all doubt that Tiana's goal is achievable. Humble beginnings and her father's death made Tiana hardworking and resilient. But those traits of hers keep getting tested, with trials and tribulations around every corner. Tiana's main challenge is resisting a fixed class structure, with all of the doubts and injustices that come with it. Next is Rapunzel. The worst thing to happen to Rapunzel is abusive parenting. Rapunzel was abducted as a child. Separated from her parents, she was locked in a tower and raised by her captor. Too young to remember her true lineage, Rapunzel loved Mother Gothel like she was her own mother. Mother Gothel instilled Rapunzel with a fear of the unknown. She told Rapunzel stories about how broken the outside world is to keep her in isolation. Rapunzel believed those stories for years. Tales of quicksand, men with pointy teeth, and the plague encouraged Rapunzel to stay isolated. But there was one event every year that gave Rapunzel hope. Every year on her birthday, Rapunzel would watch lanterns light up the sky. After years of hearing that the outside world was cold and cruel, Rapunzel saw the sky lit up beautifully. Seeing the lanterns reassured Rapunzel that humanity was still good and there was wonder to behold out in the world. It helped Rapunzel survive her isolation and gave her something to look forward to. Seeing the lanterns became her dream and gave her a sense of purpose. Rapunzel was deeply impacted by the lanterns. Little did she know that those lanterns were intended for her. After she was taken, Rapunzel's real parents grieved the loss of their daughter. They were the king and queen of Corona, so they invented a festival to commemorate their daughter's birth. So every year on Rapunzel's birthday, the people of Corona released lanterns into the sky. Every year the sky was lit and families would come together to mourn the lost princess. Every year Rapunzel's parents and people hoped she would return someday. For years it was to no avail, but eventually Rapunzel defied her abusive mother and left in secret. Rapunzel's main struggle is an abusive mother who prevents her from experiencing the world. Fortunately, Rapunzel rebels against Gothel and chases her dream. She finds happiness despite her difficult upbringing. Now for the only Pixar princess, Merida. Merida's story is about how gender roles and the responsibility of being a monarch restrict individual freedoms. Merida is a talented archer with a passion for exploring. She loves living a carefree lifestyle where she rides across Scotland, learning more about its landscape and herself. Her parents continually restrict this lifestyle, pushing her to marry and perform royal duties. Merida refuses to be defined by her status as a royal, especially when it comes at the expense of her passion. Merida resists her parents and her responsibilities. She refuses to marry. She sneaks out. She makes a statement. The archery scene is a public display of Merida's defiance. She actively shows her family and her suitors that she's unwilling to marry. She also flexes her archery skills, showing that she is capable and that her freedom has made her strong. She's gained an experience that would be abandoned if she were to follow the conventional path for a princess. Merida's unwavering commitment to her freedom is a focal point of the film. Her main conflict is with her mother, Queen Eleanor, who advocates for tradition and conformity. Merida initially opposes her mother directly. Breaking the tapestry represents Merida separating herself from her family and her royal duties. As the film progresses, Merida bonds with her mother, building a connection based on mutual admiration. Queen Eleanor spends time with Merida in her element and grows to appreciate her daughter's passion and talents. Merida begins to understand how her family's legacy has provided her with the freedom she desires so deeply. Without her family's wealth and support, she couldn't live the carefree life that she enjoys so much. Then the fishing scene is the moment where the two begin to reconcile. Queen Eleanor has been turned into a bear and is very out of her element. Her traditional prim and proper ways don't help her out in the wild. Merida's free-spirited nature helps Queen Eleanor discover there's more out there than the rules she sets herself. Seeing how at home Merida is in the wilderness makes her appreciate her daughter. Merida also grows an understanding of her mother. When her mother turns back into a human, she wraps the tapestry around herself as clothing. This is an intimate moment. The tapestry touching Queen Eleanor's bare skin shows how she holds the family closer than before. Merida's arc is about conflicting views on freedom and responsibility. By reaching an understanding with her mother, Merida is able to consolidate her identity as both a princess and a free-spirited young woman. Now for the beloved Frozen favorite, Anna. Anna grew up in isolation, orphaned and alone. Anna's parents died in a shipwreck when she was a child. Her sister Elsa became cold and distant. Even as a child, Elsa separated herself from Anna, as shown in Do You Want to Build a Snowman? No matter how many times Anna called to Elsa through the door, Elsa never put the effort in and the door never opened. Anna never knew why her sister created such a divide between them. They were close when they were young, but Elsa just shut down. She withdrew into herself, tucked away in her room in silence. Anna spent her early years alone, roaming the halls of an empty castle. Then Elsa came of age and was coronated. For the first time in many years, Anna was going to experience human contact. She'd have the opportunity to experience what the world had to offer. She had the chance to find love. And above all, she'd have the chance to reconcile with her sister. To get to know her sister, who had been a stranger for so long, for the first time in forever, really displays Anna's eagerness to reconnect with society. Unlike Elsa, who had withdrawn by choice, Anna was withdrawn by force, kept a secret because of Elsa's own abilities. Anna lets her charm out, joking and teasing about romance and chocolate. She rushes out of the gates to meet her guests and engage with the kingdom she hadn't seen in so long. But years of isolation changed Anna. After being alone for so long, Anna became naive. She fell in love with the first man she met and ended up paying the price for it. His love was a trap, a ploy for the throne. In attempting to reconcile with her sister, Anna pressures her and pushes her away even further. She goes in search of her sister, only for conflict to ensue, and Elsa to freeze Anna's heart in the scuffle. When the two sisters finally do reconcile, Anna refuses to lose her sister again. In Frozen 2, Anna is clingy and obsessive. She desperately clings to her sister out of fear that Elsa would withdraw again. Also, she ignores Kristoff's marital advances and becomes increasingly aware that Elsa is on a different path than her. The worst thing to happen to Anna is her isolation. Her lonely childhood made Anna naive and desperate for connection, even after reconciling with Elsa. Speaking of whom, now for Disney's sweetheart, Elsa. Elsa is one of the most flawed characters in Disney history. Her main character conflict is her fear of failure, mixing with her fear of loss. Elsa grew up in isolation. Unable to control her ice powers, Elsa was kept hidden from her sister and her people. For years, she trained in secret, but even as an adult, couldn't quite control her magic. This instilled Elsa with her two fears. Her fear of failure arose from her parents. Elsa's parents locked her away, forced her to practice her magic, and separated her from her sister Anna. As a result, Elsa learned that her value was directly connected to success, that controlling her powers meant success, and failing to control her powers meant failure. This also instilled Elsa's second fear, the fear of losing her loved ones. As a child, Elsa's ice powers had endangered her sister Anna. Anna's memory of the events was erased, but Elsa always remembered. She learned that failing to control her powers would hurt the people closest to her. Not only did Elsa's fear of loss enhance her fear of failure, but Elsa developed a deep desire to be separated from Anna. By distancing herself from her sister, Elsa's fear could never come true. Anna was safe at the expense of their relationship. Elsa's main fears directly connect to Anna's through their similar upbringing. Both sisters fear losing the other. Elsa isolates to protect her sister from magic mishaps. Anna clings to her sister, especially in Frozen 2, when the two have reconnected after years apart. The worst thing to happen to Elsa is her fear. Her parents helped instill Elsa's fear as a child, then as an adult, Elsa's fear of failure and fear of loss manifests as self-imposed isolation. Next is Moana. The worst thing to happen to Moana is society's expectations of her. From a young age, Moana was fascinated by the ocean. She'd grown up on the island of Motunui, which had a strict no one leaves policy. Moana's father, the chief, enforced this policy her whole life, discouraging her from venturing beyond the reef. Despite this, Moana was always entranced by the ocean and longed to explore what the world had to offer. Her passion for the ocean met resistance her whole life. Piling on top of this were Moana's duties. As the chief's daughter, Moana was due to become the chief of Motunui. She prepared for years in order to meet this obligation, attending ceremonies, giving orders, and learning leadership skills. But Moana's passion for the ocean was always at odds with her commitment to her people. This is the worst thing to happen to Moana. A lifelong turmoil between her passion and her responsibilities, combined with parental and societal pressures. Then Moana finally embraces her love of the ocean during How Far I'll Go. This is a moment of freedom for Moana, where she releases herself from social confines and follows her dream. But this release creates a series of unfortunate events and new struggles for Moana. Her initial attempt at voyaging fails, leaving her injured and forced to return home. Then, her village is endangered and Moana leaves to return the heart of Te Fiti. Moana now faces another obstacle: failure. Moana consistently fails as a voyager and a hero. She's mocked by Maui for not being the hero he expected. Even out on the water, Moana still faces social pressure, and she rises above it, just like in How Far I'll Go. Now for the newest Disney princess, Raya. Raya is unlike any princess before her. She's a competent fighter who's trained from childhood. She's from a fantasy story instead of a conventional fairy tale. And she's not the typical princess emotionally. She's gruff and has trust issues. Raya's distrusting nature stems from her dark past. When Raya was a child, she trusted Namari, a girl from another nation who showed an interest in their collective history. She believed Namari was her friend and tried to reconcile their two nations after generations of war. As an act of kindness, she showed Namari the Dragon Gem, the source of her nation's power. Namari attempted to steal the gem and in the process broke it, releasing the Droon, an ancient entity that turns everyone it touches to stone. Raya was responsible for a catastrophic event. People in her region were turned to stone immediately. Over time, the Droon spread to other regions of Kumandra, turning more people to stone. The entire region of Spine fell to the Droon, and across Kumandra, people lost their lives and their loved ones. The worst thing to happen to Raya is living with the harm she caused by accident. As an adult, she roams Kumandra alone, searching for the dragon gem pieces to right her wrongs. Not only does Raya have to live with her failure, but she also lost someone close to her, her father. Raya's father turned to stone the night the dragon gem broke. Raya grew up alone with no loved ones, only her mission to save her people and redeem herself. Raya's story is one of the darkest in Disney history. Her trust issues are well established, and it's compelling to see her learn to trust again. Living with failure is definitely the worst thing to happen to Raya. But let us know in the comments section what you think the worst thing to happen to a Disney princess is. Remember to like, subscribe, and binge our existing Disney content. But most importantly, stay wicked.